G'day, this is Janine Scott from Passionately Sewn Designs, and today we're going to talk about using your rotary cutter and your ruler to cut fabric and to cut it into strips. And if you've never used one before, it can be quite daunting, but I hope these are some little tips and tricks that I'm going to give you just to make sure it's safe, because that blade is super sharp, and then when you cut your fabric you actually want to get it nice and straight. So let's go. You do need a rotary cutting mat, and this is a mat specifically made for using your rotary cutter and your ruler, and you can see this one's being used a lot, but they're normally self-healing, and what it enables it to do that cutter won't actually go through to your table or your top of your other surface. You'll need a rotary cutting ruler, and obviously you'll need some fabric. So let's get started. So when you get your fabric, the width of fabric, it's normally, your quilting fabric's normally already folded in half, but we're going to match our selvages. What's a selvage? It's these two edges that when the manufacturer finishes your fabric, they actually finish the edge. So these two edges here don't fray. Okay, so we're going to line those up and have them even along the length of our fabric. Okay, so then we're going to place our fabric onto our cutting mat, and we're going to fold it in half. Okay, so this happens to be beautiful calf facet fabric, which I'm going to cut. We're just going to fold that in half, and with your ruler, the trick that I find is we're not going to use our mat for, and just make sure there's no creases down the bottom, we're not going to use our mat for measurements, but we're going to use our mat for alignment to make sure we have straight edges. So in combination with our ruler and our mat, we're going to get accurate cuts. Now, because of a lot of my patterns are using big pieces, they're a little bit sort of more forgiving if you cut your pieces aren't cut accurately, but if you're using smaller pieces, this is absolutely important. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that we're going to start off with a straight edge. So as you can see, I fold it in half again, and I'm going to use that center fold, and I'm going to line it up with a line on my cutting mat, and making sure that I have this centered in my mat, so when I do a cut along this edge here, I'm cutting all on the mat. Okay, so a little bit about our rotary cutter. They always will have some sort of safety feature. This one happens to be a button. When I press that button in, my rotary cutter comes out. Always, when you do not use your cutter, even after the one cut, activate your safety option, because you do not want to get cut. It will slice through your finger and it will hurt a lot. Okay, so that's my number one tip with that. Always keep this in a position where kids can't get at it, and I actually, like my scissors, I have a fabric only option. So these are my fabric rotary cutter that I look after. I only will cut fabric. Okay, ruler. You do need a proper rotary cutting ruler. It doesn't matter what brand. There's lots of bits with grips and stuff like that if you struggle cutting fabric or putting that downward pressure in. But the main thing, you know, you have to have it so you can read the numbers, because this is what we're going to be our guide for using our cutting. I do like to have my mat and my cutting ruler to be in the same numeracy. So mine are both inches. I happen to sew my quilts in inches. Okay, that's all we need. You don't have to go out and buy the most expensive one, but often your more expensive ones are better quality and they will last a little bit longer. So that's why, you know, you might spend that little bit of extra money in buying a better quality mat and rotary cutter. My rotary cutter happens to be an Alpha, and I love it. It's a 45mm one. You can get smaller ones, which are great for cutting around little template pieces, but they're just the tool that you need to have if you've never cut strips before and then shapes. Okay, so let's get cutting. So lined up our bottom fold. I had that a little bit over that little mark along there. You can see there's an inch mark along there. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to place my ruler. Now remember what I said, we're going to use our ruler as our measurements, our mat as a guide for those measurements. So to make sure I'm lining up there, lining up that line with my ruler, I then also line up all my marks on my ruler with the mat. So that allows me to know that that ruler and that mat's working together. Okay, you can see I've got that little bit of strip there, and that's what I'm going to trim off to start off with a nice straight edge. holding that down firmly, opening your rotary cutter with the blade, press it against there, and you're going to make one nice cut like that. If you have to start cutting and sawing at your fabric, two things are going wrong. You're either not using enough pressure or you need to change your blade. It should be a nice smooth cut. Move the ruler away. Done. Okay? Do not move your fabric. Leave it lined up. Okay? If you do happen to move it, you need to then readjust and either make another cut or make sure that these two lines again are matching. Okay, so it's that line there and that line there. But again, what did we say? We're using our ruler as our measurement, not our mat. Our mat is our guide. So I'm going to, for example, cut 2.5-inch strips, which is, for example, your jelly roll pieces. And we're just going to use the ruler, okay? This is the easiest method that I can find. And there's lots of different ways. This just happens to be how I use it. But I get pretty accurate cuts, you know, 99, if you're concentrating, 99% of the time. It's one of those things, if you start not thinking about it. And the old adage when carpenters, measure twice, cut once. And yes, even with small measurements like 2.5, I will count 1 square, 2 square, halfer. Okay? Again, we're lining up that bottom line, which we've already got that lined up all the way along, and I'm lining up that 1/2 inch mark on the 2.5 along that edge, all the way up to the top and the down. So remember what we said, the ruler is the measurement, the mat is the guide. Once we're happy with that, I'm then going to get my rotary cutter, open my blade, up against the ruler, pressure down on the ruler so it doesn't move, and one nice clean cut up the fabric. Again, what do we do at the end? Put the button back in. Move the ruler across. There's our strip. Nice, beautiful 2.5-inch strip. So I will keep going along there for another time. If they're bigger pieces, I use my ruler and you keep going. When you have to move your fabric, I will again start that trim. Once I make 2 or 3 cuts, I will then line that back up, trim that square, and then keep cutting. And that's how you keep getting your accurate piecing. Okay, so once we've done that, we've cut all our strips that we need, then we're going to need to cut our selvages off. You don't sew your selvages in with your quilting. So all I'm going to do, again, what do? We're going to lay down the edge strip on a line, because remember, our mat's our guide, ruler is our cutter. You can see the 2 selvages are there. I'm going to line that up, and just like we lined up that first piece, to trim that edge off, we're exactly the same. I'm going to have that line matching up with that line along there. I'm going to have all my inch squares all lined up so I know that everything's nice and accurate. Making sure that line's lined up all the way to the top. Then what am I going to do? Hold my ruler, open my blade so you can use it, put my blade up against the thing, hold down your ruler with pressure, 1 cut. And then just keep going. If you're doing squares or bigger strips, then keep cutting again. Do 2 or 3 cuts, then realign and remeasure. And that's how easy it is to cut strips with your rotary cutter. Hope that really helps. And good luck with your sewing and happy creating. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. Bye.